Welcome to the Next Level Guy Show podcast. I'm Ian, and this is where men rebuild discipline, confidence, and take control of their lives. No hype, no excuses, just real conversations and practical tools. Let's get into today's episode. The world knows all about the shot, but few know that the hardest battle was learning how to live after the war. The world knows Craig Harrison for the longest confirmed sniper shot in military history. But the real story, it begins after the war, when the mission had ended and a man has to rebuild his identity from scratch. Soldiers train for war, but very few are trained for what happens when the uniform comes off and the war's ended. You don't even have to be a soldier to recognise that feeling. That moment when the mission that you were on that once defined you and your whole life disappears and you wonder who you are now and what's next for you. Sadly, many men get lost in that transition. Meet today's guest, Craig Harrison. He's a former British Army sniper and the man behind the longest confirmed sniper shot in military history. Today, he speaks openly and vulnerably about war, trauma, and the difficult journey of rebuilding life after the uniform comes off. This isn't just a story about war. Is a conversation about identity, resilience, and the quiet work of rebuilding a life when the world you once belonged to is gone. And now, let's get to the interview. How would you describe who you are and why you're well known, or what do you think your achievements are?
Do you know what my wife says to me? She goes, "Do you realise what you've done and what you're doing now?" And I don't realise. And is it? My wife goes, "Because you're very humble in what what you've done and what you've achieved in your life." And I still don't see it now. I try and help as many people as possible, for their mental health journey and PTSD and stuff. And I help people in their military career as well, when I was in. And no, I probably to this day now, I probably still do not see who I am and what I have done and what I've achieved. And I just, I don't know, I'm just me. I'm just me, and I've gotten an ability, I think, just to talk to people and to guide people. And when shit hits the fan, when you're on tour or you're in a firefight and stuff like that, I, I don't know. I've got an ability to keep a level head, and when the rounds are going over and you got injured casualties and stuff like that, I'm just level headed. I'm just calm under that situation, but I don't see it. I don't see it. No, I don't see it. My wife go, fucking hell, Craig, but I don't see it. I'm just me. I'm just Craig Harrison.
That's probably one of the better interactions I've had because everybody kind of goes into their PR speak, and you always come across as this normal, nice guy who just did a job, doesn't see it as like this or that, but you're just like, I'm myself. Listening to my wife, we have a joke about it, etc. And I think that's the thing is we all have this identities that we try to maintain, and that's why I was more interested in learning about you than the shot or the man who made the shot, because you're now finding another identity for yourself and helping others find their versions of themselves outside of that. But I've been listening to a few different podcasts about you, and while you're growing up, you wanted to be a farrier. How did you go from that to being an army man? I know you've got a history of service in your
Yeah.
family, but what was there a turning point that led you out of that?
Well, basically, I joined the army, and I think the army now is different. I'm not sure how the entry test is. I think it's all computers, but it was all pen and paper when I joined, and it was like simple things like John's on an end of a diving board where we get more spring, A, B, or C sort of thing. So it was quite simple, and you're graded on what your what score you got on your test. And I'm dyslexic, and I really wish I concentrated more at school, but just found it really difficult. I'm more of a practical kind of guy, and I rode horses nearly all my childhood, and I had a good childhood, very strict childhood, but I achieved a lot, with eventing, triathlons and stuff like that. So I'm a very practical kind of man, and my grandfather said to me, get a trade," and so I was always directed in joining the armed forces, always. And because my love with horses and animals, I thought, fuck it, I'll join the Household Cavalry, and because
Mm.
horses and stuff like that. But I never in my wildest dreams thought it would be like it is or was or still is, how strict it was, how they how they treat the horses and what they do and all that, and there was no apprenticeships going on where I was born in Cheltenham in Gloucestershire. There was no farrier apprenticeships. So yeah, so household cavalry was the only answer. And luckily, my bar test, when I did my exam, I got offered the household cavalry because what they do when you do your exam, you're graded, and they would say, right, you're at this level, we can offer you this. Be a foot soldier, be the rifles, be this, be this. But luckily, for some reason, I must have been intelligent that day, and I got a high school test, and they offered me the household cavalry. So yeah, my dream was coming true. And then I became well. I went into the forge to do my apprenticeship, and my practical skills were on par, and it was just my written. Because you do a lot of veterinary stuff as a farrier, especially in the armed forces, because obviously you get one vet and they rely on you as well to diagnose the problems with the horses. And my written skills weren't up to it, or, pardon me, or the Latin names and God knows what to do with the horse. But my practical skills were good. So I didn't make the grade to become a farrier, but I didn't have a plan B. I didn't have a plan B. And every time I do talks or I talk to the younger generation, I always say to them, always have a fucking plan B. Always have a plan B. Because it's not necessarily plan A is going to work out. Now,
Mm.
me becoming a sniper, I realise now when I was on the ground to have a plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G, because things can go fucking horribly wrong and at a fast pace as well, So yeah, I didn't have a plan B. So I went AWOL from London, from the Household Cavalry, and I went to join the French Foreign Legion. So yeah, that's where I am.
As you do. Yeah.
As you do, yeah, because I just I felt very lost, and no one when you first join the army, no one listens to you. You
Mm.
can't have an opinion. And I felt very lost, and I knew about the French Foreign Legion, and I thought, fuck it, I'll just go and join, And when I got there, I was very honest with them, and I said, look, I'm AWOL from the British Army, and at that, if I'd have joined 5 or 6 years ago, at that time, they would have accepted me because their criteria had changed. They don't accept murderers, rapists like they used to years ago, and they don't accept people that are AWOL. So yeah, they sent me back. Um, I spent. I went back to Knightsbridge, and I did 4 days in Nick there in the prison there, and carried on soldiering. And then I started prize fighting for money. So yeah, um, I was just going down a rabbit hole I didn't really want to go down. But luckily, the army saw that, especially my regiment, and they sent me to Windsor because my regiment split into two. So you got the ceremonial side, which is the horses, and also you got the reconnaissance role, which at the time they've moved now. They're in Salisbury, Bulford. But at the time they were in Windsor, and they sent me from London into Windsor. And do you know what? I never looked back. Never looked back. Do I miss the horses? Yeah, I do. Yeah, they gave me so much calmness in my life. But do I regret going to Windsor? No, because two things happened. I wouldn't have met my wife, and I wouldn't have become a sniper, and I wouldn't be here talking to you now. So,
I love that. The first benefit you think about is the missus.
oh,
There are many men that would have gone about accomplishments, achievements, and yours is the one that made you feel pure and whole. And I think that says a lot about you. I mean, was that becoming in the reconnaissance side of things? Was that the bit that made you sort of link back to you as a kid, being out in nature, enjoying the horses, being adventurous and doing things? Was that the side of you that it appealed to?
yeah, oh, massively. I just love being outside. You know, I just love being in the wilderness and doing stuff. And the regiment gave me that. I was a bit of a, they call you a camp rat. When you're in camp, you're just frustrated all the fucking time. Because you just want to be on exercise. You want to be running around the area and stuff like that. So as much as I did, I spent a lot of time on exercise as much as I could and if there's an exercise coming up and they needed volunteers to go on the exercise, I used to volunteer because I just love being out of camp, out of that routine and back in the countryside, and I absolutely loved it. And that's why I think I flourished as well.
And do you think that gave you that identity that you were looking for, that plan, that sense of belonging? Was there a moment that you just looked around and thought, yeah, I belong here. I deserve to be here. This is what I'm here for.
Yeah, without a doubt. I struggle with purpose. And I think I struggled. Do you know what? Looking back at it, I think I've struggled for a long time with purpose in myself. What am I here for? What am I doing? I suppose if you asked anybody and you said to them, what is your purpose? They would give you an answer, and I can't give you an answer. You know, my wife would correct me and she say, "I'm your purpose." The dogs are your purpose. And but I think I've always struggled with that identity thing. Was the regiment good for me? Yeah, it took me out of London. It took me out of that place that I didn't want to go down, that rabbit hole, that dark place. Because I could have been in so much more trouble. And
Mm.
I think that's one thing I thank the regiment for, is noticing that and taking me away.
Because everybody thinks that sniping as the sort of the technical side of it, the ghost aspect to get into places to shoot, etc. But it takes some sort of amazing sense of mentality to work out the fulcrums, levers, trajectories of the shots, etc. But also like the staying for hours waiting for your shot or getting yourself into that situation. But you're very hard on yourself, I noticed, because you said about luck to get through, that you don't think you deserve it, etc. But I've come from someone with depression and intrusive thoughts and OCD, and I know that getting out of bed sometimes can be a living hell. Like it could be the worst day of your life, carrying this internal prison around with you. And not only have you come out of one of the hardest situations, been in some of the worst situations, and seen what the worst things humans can do, you're now using that to help other people find their purpose. And I find it amazing that you're so humble about it that you're just like, I don't know my purpose. I've got to keep the missus happy. We've all got to do that. But you have this, but you're doing this amazing things. You have such a strength of character. And I think that's what makes you you. What do you think it takes mentally to do that job well, or to survive that aspect of it?
I think let's go back to when I was a child. I had a brother. I've got a brother, and he's he had no interest in the countryside, horses, or anything like that. And I was a very lonely child because I spent a lot of time with my horse, riding on my own, and I had my best mate with me, Tom. We'd go out on the weekend. We'd just get some sandwiches made up and just fuck off for the whole day, And then the next day we'd do exactly the thing. We'd go into the countryside. So I was a very lonely child, and I was very brought up, strict upbringing. But becoming a sniper, see, in my regiment, there was no prospects for snipering because my regiment is so archaic, and they refused to move on with the times. But when they had a big shift around, um, and they said that they were allowed snipers into the household cavalry, I pestered them all the time to get me on the sniper course. And eventually I got onto the sniper course, and snipering is one phase. There's two phases. Well, there's seven phases altogether, but the main phases is be the shooting phase. Once you pass the shooting phase, then you go on to the sniper phase. And when you're training or learning to be a sniper, you're on your own. You don't work as a pair. You have to be mature enough to get yourself to A to B at a certain pace, at a certain time, get to that location. We call it FFP, final fire position. And once you're in your FFP, lay there for a certain amount of time and take your shot, and you do that over and over and over again. And I think I excelled at that because I've been on my own as a child and I like my own company, you know. And I think that's why I get on so well with my wife, Tanya, because it's just me and her, and we don't have many friends to overcrowd us or take up our time. It's just me and her, and I think that's stemmed from being a child to going on being a sniper to going on being my married life. And yeah, I think I excelled more because I like being on my own. Yeah.
I think that says a lot about you because it's that side of you want to surround yourself with the right people. You're not just wanting numbers or acquaintances. You want to be surrounded by the right people. And I think that's something a lot of people struggle. We all want the likes and the numbers to show off we're so popular. But give me two or three good friends, and I'd happily dump 500 Facebook contacts. Or
Yeah, yeah,
that kind of
yeah.
thing. I mean, when you are doing something that'll go out and you'll spend hours getting to position to maybe take a shot that'll last seconds, or you're going out, crawling into position or waiting for the command, what goes through your head? Are you just thinking about the sort of the ritual of the shot? Are you thinking about where you are? Like, how do you keep yourself focused and trained, ready to act? Because I like my own company as well, but did you struggle with your attention waning, or were you always so focused on the mission at hand? How did you deal with that side of things?
Do you know what? I used to train when I was training to be a sniper. We had a corridor in our accommodation block, and it was a long old fucking corridor. It was, um, I'd say about 30 meters long, because it had different rooms shooting off it. And what I used to do a thing called dry training, and basically you manipulate the bolt, load it, cock it, fire it, and you do that every couple of minutes. You would do that, and what I used to do is put my laptop at the end of the corridor, and then put a film on, and then and go back to my rifle, lay there, look for my scope, and just watch the film. And sounds horrible, but put the crosshairs on the actors and just say they were the target that I needed, and then follow them around the laptop, and then take the shot. And I think more training you do, and dry training is so important because sniping is a perishable art. It means you got to stay on the ball all the time. Once you get to your FFP, I used to I used to go to my happy place, and my happy place is being with Tanya, being with my dog, and that's my happy place, and I close my eyes, I bring myself up to the scope, and then I take the shot. For some reason, my heartbeat will slow down. And then what I used to do if I was in a location for a long period of time is give the targets names. So, say for instance, I was in Iraq or Afghanistan, looking down into a compound, I would give everyone a name, saying, "Oh yeah, there's John coming out with his wonky leg," and using them little childish things keeps you alert at all times. Because you say to yourself, "Oh, where's John gone? I haven't seen him this morning." Oh, there he is coming out now. There's his wife. Yeah, there she is. Look, God, she's ugly. And little things like that, just to keep your mind occupied on what you're doing.
Mm.
You know, and then obviously you get the green light to take the target out. So you end up taking that target out, and then your mission's done, and then you just have to extract yourself. But sometimes after you take that shot, you have to stay there for a little bit longer because they flood the area full of Taliban or insurgents looking for you. And if you extract yourself out, you're going to give your position away. So sometimes you do everything under darkness anyway. So
I mean, I love the idea of you using films to train. You're making it become automatic. What kind of films were you watching at that point? Was it just anything, or is there one that stands out
anything.
that was?
Yeah, I'm a big horror film fan. Recently I just bought 117 DVDs, horror DVDs from a camper van, and I'll just put a crappy horror film on, sit at the end of the corridor and just watch it, and I was the only one to do that. Everyone else was getting their heads down. And I wasn't. I was dry training, constantly dry training, because I think I was the only household cavalryman at the time to be on the sniper course. And failing isn't an option in my head, unless I've got a serious fucking injury. And when I went for selection with Special Forces, I got a really bad injury in the side of my knee, so I couldn't carry on. But if I didn't have that injury, I would have carried on, But
Mm.
I'm very dedicated in what I do, and I put 100% in on what I do as well. Because if you don't put 100% in, you're not going to achieve your end goal at the time. And I think that's why I excelled at snipering when I was on tour. I put 100% in finding the target, getting into that location, and yeah, doing the job.
Because we're very similar in that sense. Like one of my things to go to if I'm stressed is I'll watch like a Halloween film just to de-stress. I like watching
Okay.
films because
Yeah.
it's my thing away from people.
Yeah.
Is that the same for you?
I watch cartoons. Yeah, not childish baby cartoons, but like Scooby Doo. I watch Rick and Morty, stuff like that. Stuff that look, it's not real,
Mhm.
and it takes me out of that stress zone, if that makes sense. So if Tanya's upstairs watching her, I call it watching her crap on telly. But if she's upstairs watching her stuff and she comes downstairs and I'm watching a cartoon, she knows I'm just trying to focus and having a bit of a wobble, and it's finding them triggers that help you, that people need to do to help their mental health or PTSD, or even
Mhm.
to focus, to take themselves from reality sometimes.
I mean, I had a bit of a panic attack the last time I was on a plane, and I remember putting on the Harry Potter audiobooks, read them tons of times, heard it tons of times, but it was just that similarity, that repetitiveness of listening to it calmed me down, and I zoned in on the story. I knew, it kind of controlled it. Did you do that in the field? Do you do that when you're struggling? Is there like a particular like series of films that you just watch that kind of calms you? Is there like an audio book or anything of that kind of
Not
description?
really. Do you know what? I listen to podcasts like the Trailer Park Boys. Have you heard of them?
I've heard of them. I don't think I've
The
ever listened to them.
they got a podcast and they just make me laugh, And before I go to bed, I put a headphone in and I lay on my bed and I listen to stuff to just take me out of the reality zone. Films could be anything, mainly horror, crappy horror. That's got a lot of budget of £1 or something, and you think, fuck this is
Uh,
awful, but I'm just going to, I enjoy it, and I think that's important. You need to take that respite from reality, And even on tour, I was on my own. I used to eat with the lads, but when it come down to it, I just got back to my tent. I was just on my own, and yeah, I've always been like that. I've always been like that. Even when I was, going on the piss with the lads, I used to stop in the pub or in the nightclub, and I think, what the fuck am I doing? And I just used to just walk home, go back to
mm.
camp, and then it was one point I had an epiphany, and I thought, fuck it, I'm just not going to go out anymore. It just doesn't interest me, And when I met Tanya, nearly turned around. I nearly turned around, and I said to myself at the services, come on, Craig, you always fucking do it. Just go. Because I was meeting a friend of mine and he never tipped up. And that's how I met Tanya. So I'm not a religious man, but I believe in fate and things and people are put in your way, either to help you or, or trying to think of a word now. I can't think of it. Trying to help you or stop you. Do you know what I mean? Everything there
Mm.
is for a reason. It's fate. That's what I'm a big believer of.
It's like the universe providing or giving you the same lesson over and over again till you learn it, kind of thing.
Oh, massively. Yeah, my grandfather, Reg Harrison. He was a big father figure in my life, massive father figure. And when he passed away in '94, I was in Scotland at the time doing the Edinburgh Tattoo, and I got the call that he had passed away. And I went to see his coffin, but my mum wouldn't let me go to see him get buried, which really hurt me. And he taught me so much, so much. Um, and I miss him dearly, And people say I look like him. If you see a photo of him and me, I follow after him. So, yeah.
I love that sense of warmth to that kind of pride that you take in it. That and it shows the importance that he made in your life. I think it shows as well. I mean that you're like me, that you sit in a pub and you can be surrounded by people and think, I don't want to be here. I'd rather be with the people I love, just sitting with them. You don't need to be doing anything. You just want to be spending time with that fair few that make you feel like you. I mean, you talked about what and eat with the guys, and then you went and sat in your tent. It links back to your kind of that trust, that ability to believe in yourself and to be you. But for people who are never been in that environment, you're trained to think ahead, plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You're trained to incredible control under pressure. What did it teach you about managing that adrenaline, but also like situational awareness? Because you've been in some real hellholes. How did you manage to
Yes.
stay in your own like focused, but also survive it and just be exceptional at what you do?
Do you know what? I used to put my Tanya said to me, be safe, don't put yourself in danger, don't do this, don't do that. And I said, yeah, I promise you I won't. Um, I had 16 guys to look after, and when you're in we call it a tick, troops in contact or dust up, or there's many names for it. But when you're in a situation and shit's hitting the fan, you don't worry about yourself, you worry about your lads and you worry about their safety. So calm under pressure. I don't know why. I've always been like that. I've always. It's hard to explain.
Mm.
There's no words for it. Why I am like I am under contact.